show, and it is very political today, as it is on Thursdays, and we have Greg Vezina joining us.
Hi,
Greg,
Hugh.
this is the first time you've been on the show,
Correct.
right?
Thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome.
Captain
Thank you.
Democracy.
What?
Is that the name of it? Oh, it's that channel. It's that Democracy channel.
Well,
me.
yeah, because you're... Yes. Well, we'll get into that.
We'll get that later, yeah.
Here you are, you're leader of the None of the Above party.
Correct.
And you are running, and the party is running in the provincial election coming up in Ontario, coming up in a couple of weeks, right?
Correct. 3 weeks, right.
So let's talk about the
Why?
Yeah, why?
Why?
Okay. Why?
Why would you
want to get into politics, Greg?
Oh, that's an easy one. Let's come back to that one because we only have a 3-hour show today. Let's just talk about the None of the Above party. Why? Because 50% of people don't vote. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's getting less and less.
Yeah.
Why? Because our politicians... look, I want people to understand I want to knock all politicians. Most people that run for public office before they actually get elected are decent, hardworking people. And after they get elected, they're the same people, except they get elected into a process, into a machine, into a mechanism that gives them instant Alzheimer's, that sucks their brains out of their heads. And they can't do what they said they would do. They have to do what they have to do.
Yeah, I know.
To get elected.
They forget themselves.
So the problem with our democracy is that we really don't have one. We don't have a representative democracy, and we certainly don't have a direct democracy. We've got a political culture where political parties control the game entirely. And that's only happened in the last 10 or 20 years, you see. We didn't even used to put party names on the ballot at all. It was about the guy you elected in your constituent, you knowing that person and that person.
And that's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be.
That's what representative democracy is.
Correct.
And in fact, you can't have taxation
without
even,
representation.
Without representation.
Well, actually, you can.
Well, not legally.
Ta-da.
Not legally.
Well, you need lots of monies, and you have to go to the Supreme Court. And let's go back to some things that we can change.
Okay.
So 1 out of 2 people don't vote, and in elections like this one, which are very rare.
Why is it? Why
Well, because not only do you have basically 2 parties where people don't know who to support, but you've probably got 3 parties they don't know who to support. And in Ontario, we have an experience like this where people went out and voted protest in 1990, and they woke up and Bob Rae had a majority. Okay?
Right.
So we have an election where if it looks like in the last 3 days that one person's going to win, well, people even that were going to vote for that person will throw their vote somewhere else.
Yes.
Or people, okay? So there's going to be a lot of strategic voting, whether people in the media talk about this or not. And the public don't all talk to each other. 7 million Ontarians don't decide which one of us are going to strategically vote for who and decide who we get.
Okay.
We all go vote hoping for our hopes, and we wake up and we get what we get. So we have the right in Ontario to decline our ballots.
And what does that mean exactly?
It means you go and you get your ballot, the returning officer hands you your ballot, and you say, I respectfully decline to cast this ballot. There's nobody on that ballot I want to vote for, which is saying none of the above. And it actually counts in calculating the campaign subsidies, because parties provincially need 15% of the vote to get a subsidy. So if all the people who don't vote went and declined their ballots, none of the political parties and candidates would get any campaign subsidies, and they'd be bankrupt in one election.
Right.
And we'd have a democracy. But people stay home. Indeed, Democracy Watch, which is an organization that deals with political issues, brought a lawsuit against Elections Ontario for not telling people they have the right to decline their ballots during elections. So now we're looking at all this, and I said to myself, well, maybe we'll try and register the Direct Democracy Party, because people will get the message that we want to be a party that believes in referenda and recall. We want some kind of electoral reform so people don't get a majority with 35% of the vote, majority of the seats, to run like a dictator for 5 years. But you're not allowed to register a name with Elections Ontario that has the word democracy or democratic in it, because the New Democratic Party exists.
I see.
So I thought, okay, what name can I register that explains to everybody that we're not like all these other guys, and we believe that our MPPs are accountable to constituents, and we believe that the public has a right to govern themselves. And I thought, okay, none of the above. So I tried to register the name, and the Election Commissioner of Ontario refused.
Okay.
So I served the legal papers on them.
Yes.
They gave it to me at 5 o'clock. on one day, and I served the legal papers to them at 11:30 at night, and at 4 a.m. I served the supporting affidavit materials and everything else. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, I was at the courthouse and got on the docket to be before a judge at 2 p.m. And at 2 minutes to 2, the lawyer for the Election Commissioner of Ontario said, "We'll allow you to register your name."
So the name is registered.
So the name is on the ballot.
And it was okay. It was okay with the law, whatever the law is. It was like,
well, they never gave me a chance to ask a judge.
right. But your reading of the law said it's okay to have a name like that.
Well, the election commissioner registered the name,
So it's registered.
so it's registered.
Awesome.
Okay, so now we got none of the above. So now it turns out that I only have 6 more days to nominate candidates in 107 ridings.
6 days from today?
No, from the day I
from
registered,
that day.
because
Okay.
the way the game works is nominations open on a Thursday and they close at 11 o'clock Thursday a week later. And if you're not one of the old line parties, you're not pre-registered. So we can't even register candidates until partway through the election. And Rogers Cable and all the community stations stage their local riding debates with the candidates of the 3 major parties before nominations even legally opened. So it's like running in the Olympics with your shoelaces tied, with a bunch of hurdles in front of you in your lane.
Yeah.
And we got to run with hurdles every step we make with our shoelaces tied.
Yeah.
But we don't even get to start the race until the race is over and they've awarded the medals.
Yeah. And
And this is the democracy we live in Canada.
and who's like when you look at it, who is responsible for that? Because we got
Elections Ontario and our politicians who keep passing rules and laws to make sure that no one can get their jobs, their limousines, their pensions,
Right.
and the grants and subsidies for their friends, win contracts, contracts for their cousins and uncles and brothers.
not to mention the gerrymandering.
Just like in India.
Okay.
Right? You can't get a driver's license there unless you pay 10 extra rupees to the Congress Party, 10 extra rupees to the guy behind the window, and 10 extra rupees which goes wherever, who knows. But the head of the Congress in India is the richest person on earth and has $134 billion. But that person's not listed up with Bill Gates and everybody else.
Okay.
So,
That's the way we're headed here in Ontario, unless you get elected.
well, it doesn't matter whether I get elected or not. What matters is that people know they have the right to, in the ridings around the ballot, vote for none of the above. And that they know they have the right to refuse their ballots in those other ridings. So that if we get 5 or 10% of the vote, then the major parties are going to say these guys in the next election will be in 107 seats and these guys will be electing MPPs. Because in a 4-party race, we only need, and then the Greens, and then the Libertarians are running in every riding in this election, and who's talking about them? The Libertarians may be registered in more ridings than the Greens. And the media says the 3 parties and the 3 leaders. Watch the news every night. They don't say the 3 parties in the legislature. They don't say the 3 major parties. They say all 3 parties. Like we're all idiots and we don't know that there's more than 3 parties, and they don't want us to know. And the Broadcast Act says that their programming has to be balanced and of high standard. Where's the journalistic standard in suppressing 15 accredited political parties?
Where's the lawsuit that's going to enforce that?
Well, when you're going to sue these networks, you got to make sure that you got your ducks in a row and you're ready. I've been to the Supreme Court already. I staged the all-party leaders debates in 1993 and in 2000, put all the small parties together and put them on television in Canada and on the internet in the federal elections. We prosecuted the networks. The CRTC brought a charge against the networks for violating the Broadcast Act and not covering the Green Party. The government refused the case. We went to the Supreme Court, and the court said that the debate is not partisan as long as you have the friend of the broadcaster and their worst enemy, and you don't let anybody else on. It's all perfectly good in Canada. But the court didn't rule on the constitutional right of candidates to be heard, the constitutional right of candidates to obtain subsidies, or the constitutional right of voters to be informed. That court case is coming. That course is definitely coming, and probably a class action lawsuit for damages against all the parties and candidates that participate in this conspiracy to deny the constitutional rights of independent parties and candidates and voters to defeat them. Because the Supreme Court ruled in cases on point that the voters' rights to defeat the existing political regime and culture is constitutionally protected, and none of the existing parties or rules are constitutionally protected. We have the right.
No, that's the way it should be.
Well, that's what the Supreme Court said it is, but you got to get a question before them that they can give you that answer.
Yeah.
You can't ask them if 1 and 1 is 2 because they'll say it's 3.
Yeah.
You got to say you ruled in the last case that 1 and 1 was 3. Do you still believe 1 and 1 is 3? That's the way it is.
Okay. So what do we do, Greg? So the provincial election's coming up. Now, what riding are you in?
I'm running it. We have 4 candidates for the none of the above in Mississauga. I'm running in Mississauga, Arundel.
Okay.
And we have campaign literature and professional signs that'll start appearing the night before everybody votes.
What color are your
Black and white.
Black and
Our
white?
logo should be in the corner of the screen there somewhere. It's on the one that's broadcast, I think.
Yeah, black and white and red all over, right?
I don't know. He can get our logo up. It's a none of the above with an X, right? It's none of the above with a box and an X in it, like a ballot box. There it is. There we are. Okay, none of the above.
You know what? I actually, the more I think about it, the more I like it.
Yeah,
it's
good.
because it's like a multiple choice question, right?
Yeah.
A, liberal. B,
Yeah.
conservative. C,
none of the
above. D, none of the above.
And you know how hard it is? It's hard enough to get 107 candidates. But getting 107 candidates whose last names start with a V, W, X, Y, or Z is even harder, because on the ballot, the name of the person's last name goes first. So if I run a candidate with the name of Alex or Adams or Andrews,
What?
they're at the top of the ballot, and there's nobody none of the above.
So you're only willing to...
So for the first election, we had to try and just get candidates whose names were V, W, X, Y, and at the end of so that they'll show up none of the above. And in my riding, there's a guy whose name is W, so he's actually below me. But hey, you know.
Well, but who?
But it's to send the message.
Who do you got with an X?
We didn't get we didn't get Xylon Ziv. We were trying to get Xylon Ziv to run for us.
There was a guy named Xylon Ziv.
There's a guy named Xylon Ziv. We tried to get.
Is that true? Is that real, or you're making that up?
No, I'm not elected yet. I'm not allowed to lie.
Xylon Ziv. We got to get that guy on the show, Greg.
Yeah, okay. Just wait till I go to makeup. I'll be right back. Hi, I'm Xylon Ziv.
But that's only the first election.
After
that,
the whole idea is for people to understand that this is not a joke. This is serious.
Yeah.
Our political system is the joke. Mm-hmm. But you've got to motivate people to get off their couches. People have to understand. The way the game works is if you stay home, they win. If you go out and vote, I don't care who you vote for. If you go out and vote or decline your ballot, the message gets out. Look what happens. If we get 15% of the vote or 20% of the vote in a riding or two, how long do you think it'll be before the New Democrats, the Liberals, and the NDP, and the Conservatives, who have all promised the things that we believe in one form? The NDP have promised proportional representation. Dalton McGuinty got elected on proportional representation and then got a majority government and then said you needed 60% of the vote and screwed with the referendum. Okay? Mm-hmm. The Conservatives, Mike Harris, got elected by promising to keep his promises and passing a citizen referendum law to make sure. And I know because I ran with Mike Harris in 1990 and we wrote it in the campaign in 90 and we wrote it in 95. And then they get a majority government for 4 years to go, nah, 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 nah. We can do whatever we want. And it's not that that's bad enough. There's a requirement that our government check that the laws they're passing comply with the charter. Mm-hmm. Our governments don't even do that anymore. They pass unconstitutional laws they know are unconstitutional, and they hope little people will fight them, and then they cancel the funding for the Charter Challenges program. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Yeah.
So... people, you got to wake up. You got to get off your couch. You got to, like Howard Beale, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore. And that's how you change the world. A few very dedicated people can change the world. And all it takes is a few dedicated people in each riding to spend 15 minutes going to a ballot box and taking your ballot and seeing if there's anybody you can stomach. And if there isn't, refuse your damn ballot. And so that the major parties will realize that 50% of people in the next election are going to vote for this, and when none of the above is on every ballot, we'll win every seat and we'll have a majority government. And then the only questions the major parties will get is written questions like they got when Frank McKenna won every seat in Atlantic Canada. He got 60% of the vote, he won every seat, and there was no opposition, and he let them write in written questions. Wouldn't it be nice if the Liberals and Conservatives and NDP had to write in written questions to our legislature?
What do you mean? They come up in question period?
Yeah, they had no members in the House. They had to write written questions. The Speaker had to read them. And that's happened in Canada. Also in British Columbia, Canada, we have referenda laws and we have recall laws. The Liberal government ran promising, like Jean Chrétien did, no GST. He gets a majority of me, I like that GST. Sheila, you're out of our party, you run again. Okay, the Liberal government in BC said, no HST. We swear to God. They get a big majority, they do the HST. Yeah. So what do the people do? Former Premier Bill Vander Zalm gets 10% of the voters and signatures in 60% of the ridings. They have a referendum. The people vote out the HST. We're not talking about rights that only exist in
So what happened?
In Russia or China.
Yeah.
I'm talking about rights that exist here that we have that we don't use.
Yeah.
So we have the most beautiful country in the world. We have the most beautiful province in the most beautiful country in the world. We have the capacity to feed and clothe and shelter and educate everybody. We have the ability to collect income tax from foreign corporations that don't pay tax here. Okay? We have the right for all boats to rise together. The public has a right to decide whether we have no income tax and no schools and houses, or a flat tax where the tax on income from working for a living is the same as the tax on capital gains or speculation or making money, screwing people. And the tax rate on screwing people is half the rate on helping people. What is wrong with us? We have the right to change all of this by simply going and voting for none of the above or refusing our ballot. And in one election, the major parties will all go to the back rooms and say, if we don't do this, that son of a bitch is going to be premier. And they don't want me as premier.
Well, I take you over Hudak and whatever, what's her name?
Yeah. Well, what, I could be worse than Rob Ford? So that's the whole point. And look, when I wrote my book, Democracy A in 93, we wrote a book, John Devereux and I, who was a Toronto Star reporter, called Democracy A, and we said the Conservatives would go from 211 to less than 8 seats. Smaller than the Bloc, who had 8 seats. We said the Bloc would be Her Majesty's loyal opposition, and the Reform and the PCs would get screwed on the splits. And of course, when we wrote the book a month before Election Day, everybody said we were on drugs. Well, they were really good drugs. and then when Election Day happened, of course, you know, there's the CBC with the limousine and the remote camera, and now you guys made the most brilliant political prediction in the history of the country. How'd you do it? Well, we polled 10,000 people, and the Liberals were at 50% in Ontario and 103 ridings with 4 parties. How do they not win every seat? So let's see. Before we went anywhere from Ontario and Quebec, the Liberals had a majority. Well, how can you make this prediction? Okay. So, and the whole point in the book I said in chapter 3 was I quoted Brian Mulroney. Brian Mulroney was asked by the media after he left office about dealing with the media and the harassment and lying and being lying Brian and all the rest. Brian Mulroney said, there's only 2 headlines I ever really like. First headline said, Brian Mulroney gets a big majority. Second headline says, Brian Mulroney gets another big majority. Because you know what? Nothing else matters. And that's the point. Our politics has actually reached the point where absolutely nothing but winning an election, no matter what you have to do, matters.
Yeah.
And the policies of the parties are like ornaments on a Christmas tree. You bring out the Christmas tree, you bring out the election once every 4 years or 2 years, and you put the little ornaments on them. We're going to do this, and we'll do that, and we'll do that. And after Election Day, you just throw the Christmas tree back in the shed because you're not going to do anything you said you do because your friends got to get elected, your buddies got to get government contracts, your unions got to get a raise. The people that contributed to your campaign got to get appointed to the Senate and judges. And when it gets down to representing the people that you're supposed to represent, who cares? Because they didn't elect you. Except they did. But they don't matter. And there's a national election study that's just been done that proves in both Canada and the United States that what the people want never happens. What the unions want, or what big business wants, or what the lobbyists want, or what the families and friends want. It's like living in the Philippines, eh? It's like living in India in this country. You think the only corruption in this country is in the construction industry in the province of Quebec? Oh, if the police would really release what they have on the Liberals. If they would release what they had on the Tories before them. If they would release on what the NDP did in power. No one ever gets prosecuted. Nobody ever gets charged. No one does anything wrong, but I got a $5 million contract for my brother-in-law. I got a $10 million contract untendered for my spouse. But it's not a conflict of interest because we're separated. Okay? And all this goes on. And we believe in a fundamental democracy where all boats rise together, everybody's the same, everybody plays by the same rule. Okay? Tax rate's the same for everybody. Nobody gets grants and subsidies. We get rid of all the tax lawyers and accountants. Foreign corporations pay a withholding tax. Why should Microsoft and Apple be in this country, take all the revenue out of this country to Ireland or wherever and pay zero income tax, and a software company in Ontario has to pay a net of 30% tax? Why can't our businesses compete? Our businesses can't compete because they have to pay their fair share. So what about a society where everybody plays by the same rules? What about a society where the people actually have a say in whether we close all the schools, all the hospitals and cancel all the pensions because we're going to give tax cuts to corporations, or we actually have everybody pay tax and we actually have schools, hospitals? Okay.
May I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
How would you help people have a say?
Well,
how would you do that? Because it just seems that there's such a big gap. People
Well,
haven't had a say for so long, so they don't even know how to have a say.
Exactly.
How would you do that?
Well, because of what happened in British Columbia is a perfect example. They passed a referendum law and they passed a recall law, and within a year of the law being passed, people started using it out there. Okay? So as soon as people actually have the tools to do this,
right, okay,
they'll use them. And as long as they don't have the tools, less and less go vote.
So certain laws have to be passed that will enable to have people have a say, a referendum, for example.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so we passed a referendum law that says you need 10% of the eligible voters in the last election and 60% of the ridings.
But who's going to initiate that?
Well, the guys that are sitting there aren't going to do it.
Exactly.
So what we need is the none of the above party to win 10 seats or 9 seats, and the government to need 5 of those seats to form a majority. And then I say to Hudak, would you like to be premier? I want these 2 bills. Kathleen Wynne, would you like to be premier? I want these 2 bills. Okay? And they won't do it. Remember, the NDP has been in power federally and provincially in 6 elections in the last 15 years and could have made any of those governments implement official New Democratic Party policy, federal and provincially, for proportional representation. They never do it. They have the power to do it. Jack Layton could have made Paul Martin, the Liberal Prime Minister, do electoral reform to stay as Prime Minister and not brought down the government. When he did bring down the government, 3 times he kept Stephen Harper in power. And he could have said, do electoral reform. But no, we just found out yesterday that Stephen Harper was whispering in Jack Layton's ears saying, tell everybody Stéphane Dion's a loser and you're the leader of the opposition. And if I get to be Prime Minister, you'll be leader of the opposition. So Jack was in on it with Harper. And the NDP finally got in a position to give us real democracy and make sure that no one ever got a majority in this country with less than 50% of the vote. And Jack Layton traded it because he wanted to be leader of the opposition, because he wanted to be Prime Minister. And Elizabeth May has done the same thing to the Green Party. The party's been May-Dayed. It isn't the Green Party. It doesn't spend its money nominating candidates and organizing and ridings. It spends every cent promoting Elizabeth May, the leader of the party. But that isn't what the Green Party was founded on. The Green Party was founded on the leader is titular, they're only there for elections, and we're accountable to the constituents. So the whole point is that you can't change the system from the outside. You're not allowed to run as an independent. So what you got to do is find a way to get enough votes for somebody else or to get enough people to refuse your ballot. The geniuses in the back rooms in the parties run over to their leaders and say, these guys are going to win an election. We better steal their policies, because if we don't steal our policies, we're going to lose our limousines.
That would do it.
That will do. And you know what? If we do get 10 or 15% of the vote, and it's a minority government, Andrea Horwath will demand we have electoral reform. And if it's Hudak minority, Hudak will demand we have citizen referenda. The very bill that Mike Harris drafted in committee that got 100 of 103 MPs in favor, including Tony Clement and Jim Flair and all those back then. And the only 3 that were against it was someone named Mike Harris, Bob Ray, and Dalton McGuinty. And why were the 3 major parties leaders against a bill that every other MPP in the legislature was in favor? Because it gave power back to the MPPs and took it from the leader. And I've asked Andrea Horwath, and I've asked Tim Hudak personally to their face, both, to pass that bill. I said, Andrea, introduce a referenda bill and watch the NDP, watch the Conservatives and the Liberals vote against it because they really don't want democracy, and then you can win a majority. And I said to Hudak, they won't vote for you, Hudak, because they don't trust you. Like you're going to be like Mike. You're going to promise to do one thing and promise to keep your promises, and people got tax cuts will believe you, and everybody else knows the truth, and you're not going to pass a referenda bill. I said, if they thought that they could control you if you had a majority, they'd give you a majority. And he won't do it because he wants a majority with no control. They all want to be kings, and they all want us to be peons. And the problem with that is, eventually the people grab the king by the hair, chop his head off, and stick it on a pole. The last time we did that to King Henry, we got something called a Magna Carta. So let's see, 800, 900 years ago, we had the right to democracy. It's 900 years later, and our petitioning rights are a joke, and that's all we have left.
So who should we vote for in the next election, Greg?
You should vote for the none of the above party. It is calm and rational.
So if the none of,
our leadership does not
if the none
get
of the
excited.
above party goes in power, what are you going to?
I will have. We will pass a referenda law. First thing we will do is we won't actually bring back the House for 12 months because we have 12 months to do it. Then I will go to all the other parties and take the best candidates, the best people of every of the other parties, and I'll put them right in my cabinet. And I will make a government of national unity. Mm-hmm. There's no law under the British parliamentary rules that says we can't work together. There's no law that says we have to act like school children in a legislature and piss all over and yell and scream and jump up and down. Absolutely not. And even in Britain, where you have minority governments now because the two-party system in Britain has 3 major parties, the 2 major parties have got together to govern. In Germany, where they used to complain about tyranny of the minority because the fringe parties had votes and controlled the government, the 2 major parties got together and formed a government of national unity. So the first change I would make is it would not be about the party, it would be about taking the best people that got elected and putting them in a government. Then, for that 12 months while we govern with the best people in the legislature, so we'd have experienced people, et cetera, and the dollar wouldn't disappear and crash and you know, the Illuminati blow up my house or whatever, or I fall off my bike in front of a beer truck or 5 beer trucks in a row just to make sure.
Or a black fly truck.
Or I drink a black fly and I turn blue. So, okay, so in order to, so that we'll have a strong, stable, conservative majority government. Oh, no, that's the other guy. In order to say that we'll have a stable government and I won't nationalize the banks, even though Ontario has the right to have the Province of Ontario Savings Bank.
Well, they sold that, didn't they?
And they sold it, the idiots. Yeah, we used to make money on our banks, like Alberta had the Alberta Treasury banks. No, let's give it to the Bilderbergs. Let's give it to, who are them? The Rothschilds. Nah, Canadians don't need their own money. We need to give it to the IMF. No.
Well, they sold it to Desjardins, though, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway.
Okay. So, as I was saying, so what we will do is we will have a stable government. We will announce the policies that we wish to pass, but before the legislature sits to pass the law, we'll have a referendum. And so we'll have a referendum on, do you want a referendum law? We'll have a referendum on, do you want a recall law? We'll have a referendum on, do you want a flat tax? We'll have a referendum on a bunch of policies and find out from the people what they want. And then all the MPPs from all the parties will go into the legislature and go into committee, and the things that we agree on will pass. And then we'll worry about fighting about what we want to disagree on.
Okay, so that's a truly representational government,
democracy,
right?
Right.
Now you're in 9 ridings.
Yes.
Let's list those ridings so people in those ridings know what.
Can I have my assistant bring a?
Okay, Greg.
Okay,
we'll see if we can get that. We'll see if we can get that. But what people should do when they go, they should look for the none of the above. It's going to be on the ballot, right?
It's on the ballot.
None of the above.
None of the above party.
It's
none of the above party. Brackets NOTA. Nada.
Yeah.
So it's like on this corner it says nada.ca. So it says none of the above in the top. It says none of the above. Brackets nada, and you'll know.
Okay.
So that's the website, nada.ca.
And nada.ca.
People can go check that out right now.
Yeah, there's only 3 policies, and if you click on the policies, it takes you to the Wikipedia definition, just so there's no confusion. Representative government. Click on Wikipedia. What Wikipedia says it's supposed to be is what we want. Referenda, you click on referenda, it shows you what it's supposed to be, and recall, and it shows you what it's supposed to be.
Okay. Well, Greg, this is great. Oh, before
Thank
we
you for
go,
having me.
I just want to, like what we talked about a little bit, Vezina.
Yes.
Like the Vezina trophy.
Yes.
Like Georges Vezina,
Georges Vezina, the goalie.
famous goalie for the Montreal Canadiens back in the day. You're related somehow to
indirectly
those guys, right?
way before. In fact, more really directly related to Joseph Vezina, who was the first Canadian composer who was born about 125 years before George Vezina.
But he was related to Georges as well, right?
Yeah, well, in fact, all the Vezinas go back to, because we did the genealogy, go back to a guy from Romania, a Dacian king, and his second in command was the wizard, because you had the king and the wizard, and the wizard's name was Vezina. And for 50 years, this is a true story, this Dacian king defeated the Romans. The Romans tried to take this guy's land for 50 years, and they defeated him every time because he had studied Xiao from China, and he had forward military operations and stole their supplies and everything else. So every time they attacked him, before they even attacked him, the battle was over. Mm-hmm. And the only time that the king and Vezina were not together, they got the king alone and murdered him. And Vezina disappeared. But I'm back.
Okay, Greg,
That's
awesome.
said,
and you're cheering for the Montreal Canadiens. You're cheering for the Canadiens. Are they going to win tonight?
Me, les habitants, hey. Me, I vote for them. Me, I hope they win that Stanley Cup. And there's a precedent this, because the last time there was only one Canadian team that made the Stanley Cup finals. Yeah. It was Les Canadiens.
Yeah.
And we won that cup.
Well, if anybody can do it, it's going to be the Canadiens.
Well,
right?
we're only down 2-0. You know,
Well,
when you're down 3-0 and you have to win 4 in a row when you have a tough row.
Well, that's why they're so concerned about tonight's game.
Yeah. Well, tonight we're going to win, and it's 2-1, and it's all good.
Okay. Anyway, Greg, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you.
Get you back up more often and make this democracy thing really happen in this country.
I promise to take my meds before I come, so I'll be a little more calmer.
I don't know if we're gonna have black fly the next time, Greg.
Well, yeah, that was really good. But I'm looking for the medicinal marijuana shop because there aren't any of those anymore. They're all closed. Stephen Harper took all the drop-in centers away.
Well, no, you can go to. There's a cafe. You can. There's a
no,
million
yeah, but
places
then I
downtown.
have to wear a Matt Myrna for mayor badge.
I don't think.
None of the above or an independent.
Yes. Well, that's right. No, that's true, and I mean that. Look down your ballot, because there's a lot of independent candidates, or there are a lot of candidates for smaller parties that, if you look at their policies, you'll find you'll be very surprised that you would agree with.
And you know what? If you get those independents elected and you get elected, Greg, you can select from those elected independents for the cabinet. So it's really time for the people of Ontario to step up and take their democracy back, right?
Correct. Take our democracy back.
Okay.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for Liquid Lunch today. Medea, this has been great.
Yeah.
And, thanks, everybody, for being here and the people for sticking around. And we'll see you all next time right here on Liquid Lunch. In the meantime, think about who you're going to vote for.
And vote. Or non-vote, but
none of the above,
refuse.
or independent, or small party.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Ciao, baby.
Ciao.